rituals are a kind of story. And I think that's also what Gabra are doing by enacting rituals, is they impose a kind of meaning, it's a sense-making of the death practice and what they're going through internally. You know, these are nomadic pastoralists who are kicking around in the Chalbi Desert in northern Kenya and then intruding up to the highland escarpment in Ethiopia, herding camels, goats, and sheep. And so in the context of all this movement, people die. And when somebody would die, they have a prescription that the body should be buried within the day, before nightfall. And everybody participates in this grave. And so they'll dig this grave, and even people who are passing by will be expected to come and participate and help dig the grave. So there's this, it immediately engages this great social obligation. The whole community is part of this. And there's a reluctance to let the body go. And I think these are ritualized expressions of grief, or at least the initial one, this kind of trembling that has to happen. There's supposed to be a way in which the cloth that's covering the body is intentionally made to shake, indicating a kind of grief, a kind of sadness, and perhaps even the quivering muscle of a dying body. But the burial sets in motion a period that they call hamtu, and it's what we would call mourning. And over the next year, it's usually about a year long, the immediate family is enjoying to be somehow outside of society. The men will not cut their hair. The widow, if there's a widow, will shave her head, and she wears special white cloth. The men let their hair grow, they let their fingernails go, they're not supposed to work. The immediate women in the family are not supposed to work. Everybody is in some ways in a state of animated suspension, in a kind of purgatory, in a kind of limbo. And everybody else in the community does work for them. And so this is another expression of the kind of the sociality of death. That death immediately engages this great influx of the community to support the people who are grieving. And during this period, they continue to live and they continue to eat, but they don't work. And this period is then ended by a sacrifice. In the case of certain men, the sacrifice of a bull camel. And this is a magnificent event because the camels are much more valuable to them alive than dead, and so they only do this on special occasions. And people will come from far and wide to share in the meat and the fat from the animal, but they also come to pray and to sort of set aside the formal mourning period, to reintroduce these people back into their ordinary lives. In a sense, for them, it's a kind of rebirth. While they're in mourning, they are in a sense of decay. They are in a sense dying with their loved one. And then after the period of mourning, they're allowed to come back to life and to assert life and to be sort of okay about being alive and joyful in life. When during hamtu it's kind of muted, it's bad form to express great joy in life when your loved one is dead. And I think they would agree with me that at some point, as pastoralists, as people who raise animals for a living, that death is an integral part of life, and this is a reminder of that. It's also, in death comes the food for life and to sustain them. There's no agriculture in this part of the world. They can't grow the crops. If they're going to eat, they have to drink milk and they have to eat meat and fat and oil from the animals, and that's what they live on. And so the sacrifice of an animal is an assertion of life, even as it involves death. And I think that irony is particularly and acutely conscious for pastoralists. They're aware of this connection between life and death, and then they celebrate it in a way. The act of sweeping the grave, these 8 or 16 years later, is a kind of a mark of, okay, this person's being is fading, in the poignancy of our lives. So there's this great sequence, and there's a lot of intervals in between that mark different stages of that grief process. So they build this grave, and then 8 or 16 years later, they sweep it, and in some ways sweep away the grief, finally.